And now I invite the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, the Honorable Hugh Todd, to make his presentation.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me first of all take this opportunity to recognize the visionary leadership of His Excellency Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Let me also take this opportunity to thank my dear colleague and friend, Minister responsible for Finance, for his accurate representation of the President's vision and the will of the Guyanese people in the 2025 budget, themed a secure, prosperous, and sustainable Guyana. Mr. Speaker, if you allow me to reflect for a moment on over the last 4 years, the stewardship of His Excellency and his leadership, we've moved in 2020 from a plan for prosperity to a path to recovery, economic dynamism, and resilience. Steadfast against all challenges, resolute in building our one Guyana, improving lives today, building prosperity for tomorrow. 2024, staying the course, building prosperity for all. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to highlight these thematic areas that cover the budgets from 2020 to 2025 to show the trajectory and the clear vision and leadership of His Excellency the President, and the fact that we have been able to deliver to the people of this dear land of ours. As we approach the implementation of the budget for this year, Mr. Speaker, 2025, and with, of course, the support from this side of the House and the support from the opposite side of the House, I know that we will be making the people of Guyana proud. I think it was very admirable, Mr. Speaker, listening to the Honorable 𝐁𝐔𝐃𝐆𝐄 from the other side of the House this morning on a very clear and objective understanding of the budget 2025 and her recognition of the stewardship of His Excellency the President, highlighting our performance indicators. I think that is very commendable, and the people who support the 𝐃𝐄𝐁𝐃 coalition should be very proud of the representation that they're receiving from that honorable member, and I thank her for her submission. Mr. Speaker, allow me to also highlight the key aspects of my dear colleague, the Honorable Susan Rodriguez, for her submission in highlighting very important points that have led to Guyana's trajectory in terms of our development. And I think it's very important for us to understand that we have been very clear, we have been very articulate, and we've been very responsible as a government. Mr. Speaker, recall when we took office in 2020, we did not have a foreign policy. When we took office in 2020, we did not inherit a foreign policy from the 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐓. That will bring clarity.
You're being charitable.
So, Mr. Speaker, if you look at what we've achieved thus far, we have been able to use our development here in Guyana and to take that development across the world under the leadership of His Excellency the President as a model for development, especially in developing countries. Mr. Speaker, importantly for us in the Foreign Ministry, we have the responsibility of executing the President's mandate on foreign policy, which would allow me to begin with the protection of Guyana's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Mr. Speaker, we remain cognizant of the fact that for Guyana's economic prospects to be fully realized, our relations with bordering countries, especially those that harbor ambitions to the very territory we need to develop, must be carefully managed. Guyana's diplomacy would therefore be at the forefront of the efforts aimed at ensuring a positive and stable environment for the development of critical industries, including the hydrocarbon and related sectors during this year and the next few years as we seek to move our country forward. In this regard, in fulfillment of the mandate to protect and preserve Guyana's territorial integrity, on the Venezuela front, the ministry focused on three broad areas, namely, 1, lobbying for international support against the claims of Venezuela to Guyana's territory; 2, the advancement of our case before the International Court of Justice, the ICJ; and 3, the sensitization of the local and international community on Guyana's border issues. Mr. Speaker, in relation to the claims of Venezuela, there are systematic approaches made to individual states as well as critical international organizations and bodies, including CARICOM, the Commonwealth, the United Nations Security Council, and the OAS, to name a few. And this is to support Guyana's bid to preserve its sovereignty and territorial integrity, and in its call for the denunciation of the actions of Venezuela that were in contravention of the December 1st, 2023 ICJ General International Law and the joint declaration of the Argyle for Dialogue and Peace between Guyana and Venezuela on December 14, 2023. In a statement released on April 15, 2024, the United Nations Security Council urged the parties to exercise maximum restraint, reminding of the obligations to comply with the Order of Provisional Measures issued by the International Court of Justice on the 1st of December 2023, and underlining the importance of maintaining regional peace and security and ensuring that the Latin America and Caribbean region remains a zone of peace. Both CARICOM and the Commonwealth urged Venezuela to refrain from any further actions that would hinder regional and hemispheric peace and stability, and to adhere to the international law as the only viable path to achieve a just and lasting settlement to the controversy. Mr. Speaker, on December 9, 2024, Guyana submitted to the ICJ its final written brief on the merits in the case against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Venezuela will have the opportunity to respond to Guyana's reply with its rejoinder, due on the 8th of August this year. The court will in due course set a date for the oral hearings. Guyana welcomes Venezuela's engagement in the merits of the case. Mr. Speaker, with respect to the management of our relations with Suriname, the accumulation and analysis of historical documents relating to the unresolved border issues between the two countries has been and will continue to be given significant attention. Preparations are underway for the convening of a meeting of the Border Commission between Guyana and Suriname this year. We reaffirmed the commitment of our two countries to pursue the agreed initiatives within the Strategic Dialogue and Cooperation Platform, or the SDCP. Several issues of mutual benefit to both sides were discussed, including the bridging of the Corentyne River. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry will continue to employ several multimedia avenues to disseminate information on Guyana's borders. In this regard, our diplomats, both at home and abroad, are continually briefed on the strategy of the government and the role they play in carrying out this strategy. Mr. Speaker, allow me to reflect on our participation at the multilateral level. Guyana's international engagements are grounded in the provisions of our Constitution, respect for the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter, and the fundamental adherence to international law. This, in turn, guides the pursuit of the key objectives of our foreign policy, which include the following. 1. The maintenance of Guyana's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and promoting regional and international support to this end. 2. To maintain, develop, and enhance relations with strategic countries at the bilateral, regional, and multilateral levels, and to ensure that Guyana is actively and meaningfully engaged in the multilateral arena. 3. To focus on ensuring that Guyana can build the partnerships required to achieve its development objectives, including full implementation of the 2030 Agenda on the Sustainable Development Goals, and that Guyana contributes substantively to the global fora dedicated to advancing their implementation. Mr. Speaker, Guyana's approach to human rights issues is premised on the obligations deriving from the Constitution, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, and the several international instruments to which Guyana is party, including the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, as well as to advance Guyana's leading role in finding solutions to global challenges, including climate security, food security, and energy security. Mr. Speaker, we've had a very active participation at the level of the United Nations Security Council for the year 2024. So please allow me to update the citizens. Since commencing its tenure on the United Nations Security Council on January 1st, 2024, Guyana has actively worked to enhance partnerships with fellow council members within the framework of the Africa Tree or the African Group, the elected 10 or the elected 10 members, and the permanent 5 members to advance the mandate of the Security Council, which is the exercise of the primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. Mr. Speaker, Guyana served as President of the Council for the month of February 2024 and has hosted a signature event under the theme, The Impact of Climate Change and Food Insecurity on the Maintenance of International Peace and Security. This event was chaired by His Excellency President Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali. During 2024 as well, Mr. Speaker, Guyana collaborated with the African Group of the Security Council, Algeria, Mozambique, and Sierra Leone through the African Mechanism, which fosters cooperation, consultation, and collaboration between the African Union and CARICOM member states, with a shared commitment to advancing African common positions and amplifying Africa's voice within the Security Council. Mr. Speaker, Guyana continued to work closely with the African Group partners to build consensus on African issues and speak with a unified voice, contributing to key Council outcomes, such as a press conference on Libya, urging de-escalation, and a presidential statement on missing persons. Additionally, the African Group jointly engaged on non-African matters, including Haiti, Colombia, Yemen, Syria, Afghanistan, children in armed conflict, and other topics where member consensus existed. In February 2024, Guyana co-led a field mission to Colombia with the United Kingdom and Switzerland. In October 2024, Guyana was the coordinator of the elected 10 members of the Council. We also partnered with Switzerland as the informal focal point on conflict and hunger within the Security Council for the year 2024. Mr. Speaker, this aligns with Guyana's proactive stance on addressing conflict and hunger, particularly conflict-related food insecurity, which the government of Guyana prioritizes as both a driver and consequence of conflicts. Guyana is also a member of the incoming chair of the Informal Expert Group on Climate, Peace and Security, and was also elected to serve on the Organizational Committee of the Peace Building Commission, the PBC, filling the seat allocated to the Group of Latin American Caribbean States, GRULAC, in the Security Council category. Mr. Speaker, allow me to briefly highlight our achievements on human rights issues, including indigenous peoples and African descent rights and women issues. Guyana participated in its third periodic review in March 2024. The United Nations Human Rights Committee, during 3 of its meetings, considered Guyana's third periodic report under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, or the ICCPR. Mr. Speaker, Guyana reaffirmed its commitment to honoring its obligations under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and other applicable conventions. Guyana also updated on actions since the last report, including enactment of new laws and amendment to statutes to strengthen human rights, reform the health system, modernization of the judiciary, implementation of anti-corruption measures, safeguarding revenue from the oil and gas sector for future generations, providing digitalized platforms to make businesses' activities more transparent and accountable. As it pertains to non-refoulement or not forcing migrants to return to their home countries, Mr. Speaker, Guyana stated that migrants from Venezuela were not returned to the country of their origin, but welcomed humanely. Guyana also told the committee of the restitution of the multi-agency committee created to ensure Guyana honors its commitment to international humanitarian law. Mr. Speaker, on reparations, His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Irfan Ali has made several calls for reparations for the historical injustices related to transatlantic slave trade and restitution for the impacts on communities and nations. His Excellency urged that the establishment of a reparations mechanism should be established. Guyana participated in several high-level conferences on human rights related to issues including the 17th session of the Conference of States Parties on the Convention of Rights of Persons with Disabilities, or the CRDP. Mr. Speaker, Guyana also participated in the 3rd session of the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent, which was held in April 2024. During that meeting, Guyana supported calls for a second international decade for the people of African descent. Guyana also proclaimed its commitment to International Convention on the Elimination of all forms of racial discrimination. We have also had the privilege of informing on the progress made by the people of African descent and its budgeted subventions made towards supporting civil society organizations geared towards their continued development. Mr. Speaker, Guyana is also informed that the Ethnic Relations Commission and its purpose for fostering harmony among the ethnic groups in Guyana. Saying in 2024, Mr. Speaker, Guyana participated in the 23rd session of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. During that session, Guyana reaffirmed its commitment to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Guyana also had the privilege of informing the session of the progress made by Guyana's First Peoples and its budgeted subventions made towards their continued development. We as a country also shared our unique governance model and indigenous peoples' interaction during the National Tushao Council. Mr. Speaker, at the 113th session, we also participated in a dialogue on the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, or the CERD. During the session, Mr. Speaker, Guyana was able to engage with the committee and by doing so reaffirmed our commitment to the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We also undertook to submit our 15th and 16th periodic reports to that committee. Mr. Speaker, allow me to speak a little bit about our Sustainable Development Goals. The government of Guyana has aligned the country's national development pathway to focus on priority areas such as food security, climate change, and agriculture financing, as it works towards achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 2, zero hunger. The agriculture and food systems sector in Guyana is being repositioned and transformed into an expanded, diversified, modernized, resilient, and competitive sector. Moreover, Guyana has emerged as a leader in CARICOM, being the lead head with responsibility for agriculture, agricultural diversification, and food security within the 𝐃𝐄𝐁𝐃𝐄𝐁 cabinet. As the region implements the CARICOM agri-food systems agenda, Guyana has committed to playing an integral role in fulfilling the goal of reducing CARICOM's food import bill by 25% this year, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Guyana is making significant strides in advancing health sector resilience to achieve universal health coverage in accordance with SDG 3, good health and well-being. The government of Guyana has prioritized efforts to advance integration of human, animal, and environmental health sectors to improve disease prevention, preparedness, and resilience against climate-related health impacts through the implementation of a One Health approach. By increasing cross-sectoral collaboration, particularly in One Health, and sustaining investments in health, environmental, and emergency response systems, Guyana aims to improve health outcomes, advance universal health coverage, and support regional health security and resilience. Mr. Speaker, the project will strengthen public health preparedness by continuing efforts to build sustainable capacities in pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response following the Guyana COVID-19 Emergency Response Project. Guyana has continued to be a leader on forests. With Guyana's Low Carbon Development Strategy 2030 agenda, showing real results in climate finance with carbon credit sales for the period 2016 to 2020, already earning Guyana $750 million. This is a result of Guyana's landmark issuance as the first jurisdictional scale carbon credits program in the world, with 33.4 million tons of carbon credits issued to Guyana. Mr. Speaker, additional milestones for Guyana include the fact that His Excellency the President represented Guyana at the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly and also participated in the debates as well as the Summit of the Future. His Excellency emphasized Guyana's commitment to sustainable development and the combat of climate change. His Excellency also called on countries to fulfill their related pledges to alleviate the challenges faced by small island developing states or SIDS, especially for those affected by the rise in sea levels. He also advocated for action to assure food and energy security, while underscoring the collective responsibility to provide $300 to $500 billion needed to reform the global food system. Mr. Speaker, in advancing our leadership regionally and at the multilateral level, Guyana was elected to serve on several international bodies, such as the Pan American Health Organization, or PAHO, which we are chaired this year. Congratulations to my dear colleague, Dr. Frank Anthony.
Leadership on the global stage.
The Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and the Meteorological Organization, or the WMO. Guyana has also won the bid to host the annual exercise of simulation of humanitarian assistance in case of disasters within the ambit of the Organization of American States in 2025. Mr. Speaker, Guyana also hosted the Food and Agriculture Organization's 38th Regional Conference for Latin America and Caribbean states, with representations from 289 participants from 33 countries, 8 United Nations organizations, 13 intergovernmental organizations, 6 civil society organizations, 6 private sector associations, and 10 scientific and academic organizations. Allow me to thank my dear colleague, Minister of Agriculture, Honorable Mustafa, for leading this very, very great initiative. Mr. Speaker,
Tell them.
in January 2025,
They can't take it.
Guyana will submit its 4th cycle national report under the Universal Periodic Review process to the Human Rights Council. In addition, the country will be reviewed in May at the Human Rights Council in Geneva, based on the national report submitted in January, the Civil Rights Society reports, special rapporteurs, and other human rights actors in Guyana. Mr. Speaker, Guyana also assumed the role as coordinator of the African Group for the first quarter of 2025. And as part of that role as coordinator, Guyana will hold the African Group retreat in Georgetown in February this year. Mr. Speaker, Guyana will also assume the role of co-chair of the Informal Expert Group on Climate and Security in 2025, along with the Republic of Korea and Slovenia on the United Nations Security Council. Guyana will also resume the presidency of the Security Council for the 2nd time in the month of June 2025. Thematic areas for this signature event are currently being under consideration. Mr. Speaker, wrapping up on the multilateral level,
Don't wrap up. Keep going.
Guyana is campaigning for its candidacy to the Executive Board of the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, at the elections scheduled to take place during the 43rd session of the General Conference of UNESCO in November 2025 in Uzbekistan. And my dear colleague, Minister Manik Chan, is going to lead this charge. Mr. Speaker, on our foreign trade policy, Guyana remains an open and liberalized trade policy environment that is consistent with our membership of the Caribbean Community, Single Market and Economy. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation has continued to successfully execute its mandate of articulating and coordinating Guyana's trade policy at the bilateral, regional, and multilateral levels. At the multilateral level, Guyana remains committed to a fair and development-friendly rules-based trading system. Since 2020, the government of Guyana has strengthened the technical capacities of the country's diplomatic representatives, respectively, to the World Trade Organization in Geneva and to the European Union and the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States, or the OACPS, in Brussels. At the WTO, Mr. Speaker, the Guyana mission in Geneva continues to provide group leadership in CARICOM. In CARICOM's representation at the fisheries subsidies negotiations and African, Caribbean, and Pacific group representation on the agriculture negotiations. This is also consistent with Guyana's lead responsibility within CARICOM for agriculture sector development, including agriculture diversification and food security. Mr. Speaker, we continue to implement trade measures directed at the expansion of the economy through enhanced imports and exports profiles, with both traditional and traditional sources. In this regard, we have consistently engaged Guyana's trading partners in relation to the removal of market access barriers with a view to securing and expanding improved market presence for our products in both regional and international markets. Mr. Speaker, between 2020 and 2023, exports increased by 285%, moving from $2.8 billion to $10.8 billion, accounting for 106% improvement in our non-oil exports.
To allow you to conclude, Honorable Minister, we'll need an extension.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for reminding us. I'd like to ask that the honourable member be given 5 minutes to conclude his statement to the House.
Thank you, Minister Teixeira. Minister Todd, you may continue to conclude in 5 minutes.
Consequently, trade with our major extra-regional partners increased significantly. Exports to the United States and Canada expanded by $6.2 billion and $385 billion respectively. The growth of our exports to the United Kingdom and the European Union has also been exponential, increasing by $747 million and $2.2 billion during the period. This trend is reflected in our extra-regional exports, which have risen by US $2.8 billion since 2020. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, exports to non-traditional markets have increased substantially. The UAE, Singapore, and India are now ranked among Guyana's top 10 export destinations, and since 2020, our exports have grown by $2.1 billion to those countries. Mr. Speaker, we're also strengthening our public-private trade partnership. During the year 2024, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation continued to strengthen our interagency trade policy consultative mechanism with the private sector and the wider business community as strategic partners in trade facilitation and market access development. Allow me to move to diaspora, Mr. Speaker. The government of Guyana, under the leadership of His Excellency, continues to aggressively pursue the involvement of the diaspora community in the national development. During the year 2024, we undertook more than 15 diaspora engagements in approximately 8 jurisdictions. We will continue to engage with the Guyanese living abroad to encourage their involvement in the national development process. Mr. Speaker, on migration, the Ministry has improved the efficiency in the processing to allow for timely deliverables in keeping with the Ministry's mandate. In 2024, the Ministry processed 409 successful applications of Guyanese who remigrated, primarily from the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Caribbean states. Since taking office, the government of Guyana has processed approximately 2,000 qualified remigrant applications. Mr. Speaker, this highlights the trust and confidence of the diaspora in the PPPC government. The Remigration Unit continues to process applications within 7 working days. This represents 1/3 of the processing time under the APNU AFC government. Mr. Speaker, I set out to highlight Guyana's performance at the level of the Foreign Ministry in advancing our foreign trade development, our foreign policy agenda, as well as our trade policy agenda. The numbers don't lie, Mr. Speaker. We have positioned ourselves as a leader on climate, on energy, and on food. We will continue along that trend, Mr. Speaker, with the leadership of His Excellency and his competent government. And we, as a people, will work together in advancing the interests of the people. Let me take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to thank the Minister responsible for finance. Again, esteem of the Foreign Ministry. Allow me also to thank the members of staff of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation for their support and for their hard work during the year 2024. And let me also commend this budget to this Assembly for its passage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.